There are games that distract you from life, and then there are games that drag you into the darkest, strangest corners of your own psychology and dare you to make sense of what you find there. Control is the second kind, developed by Remedy Entertainment, the same studio behind Alan Wake. Control is one of the most psychologically rich, philosophically dense, and visually surreal games ever made. On the surface, it looks like an action shooter set in a brutalist government building, but beneath those cold concrete walls and flickering fluorescent lights, something far stranger is happening, something deeply, profoundly human. Control is not really about a woman fighting paranormal entities in a government facility. It's about the terrifying question of whether we are ever truly in control of ourselves, our minds, our memories, our identities, the invisible forces that shape our every decision. Today we are going to walk through that question together. Before we start, smash that like button and subscribe to my channel if you believe that great video games carry real wisdom for everyday life. Jesse Faden arrives at the Federal Bureau of Control, the oldest house, looking for her brother, Dylan, taken away years ago after a childhood incident in their hometown of The Ordinary, Wisconsin. The FBC is a covert government agency that investigates objects of power and altered world events, reality-bending phenomena that defy scientific explanation. The moment Jesse steps through those doors, things become immediately, unsettlingly strange. The director has just been shot. The building itself seems alive. Corridors shift, gravity bends. His corrupted agents whisper in unison, their eyes blank and white, moving in eerie, synchronized rhythms, like figures in a nightmare. And Jessie, almost as if pulled by something she cannot name, picks up the service weapon, the FBC's most sacred object of power, and is chosen as the Bureau's new director. This is already deeply Jungian territory. The oldest house is not just a building, it is a psychic architecture, a literal labyrinth of the unconscious, full of locked doors, hidden passages, and rooms that should not exist. Like Silent Hill, like Alan Wake's Bright Falls, the space Jesse inhabits is a projection of inner life made physical. The brutalist concrete, hard angles, crushing ceilings, no natural light, no warmth, is the aesthetics of a psyche under pressure. A mind managed from the outside for so long, it has forgotten what sunlight feels like. The closer Jessie gets to the building's heart, the deeper she descends into the most buried parts of herself. And that is where control begins to speak to us, not as players, but as human beings. The central concept of control is the object of power. Ordinary, mundane objects, a television set, a janitor's mop, that have become vessels of enormous, reality-warping force. They have absorbed so much psychic energy, so much fear and longing, that they have become genuinely dangerous. The FBC contains and studies them, because if you don't understand these forces, if you don't name them, classify them, work with them consciously, they will consume you. Carl Jung spent his entire life trying to say exactly this. He called them complexes, autonomous psychological forces that live inside us without our awareness. A fear of abandonment, money anxiety, a hunger for approval, a shame that crystallizes around a single childhood moment and quietly directs every decision we make for the rest of our lives. Jung wrote that most people do not live their own lives. They are lived by their complexes. They are, in other words, controlled. Think about that in the context of your own life. Have you ever reacted to something, a comment from a colleague, a tone in someone's voice, a moment of being overlooked, with a force that felt wildly disproportionate to the event? That disproportionality is the fingerprint of a complex at work. The present situation is just the trigger. The charge belongs to something much older and deeper. In the game, the hiss is the great antagonizing force, a resonant frequency, a psychic infection that corrupts everything it touches, turning agents into hollow, chanting automatons who have completely surrendered their individuality. They are not enemies in the conventional sense. They are people who lost themselves, overwhelmed by something they never saw coming, something they never named or understood. How often does this happen in real life? We don't call them his, we call them anxiety, resentment, addiction, compulsive self-sabotage, the chronic voice that says we are not enough. We get so used to these forces that we stop noticing them. They become our personality, our default setting, the water we swim in. We become like the corrupted agents in the oldest house, people who move through life chanting the same old patterns without any real inner freedom at all. The practical life lesson is both simple and demanding. You must name what controls you, not avoid it, not medicate it into silence. Name it, investigate it the way the FBC investigates its anomalies, with curiosity and willingness to be disturbed by what you find. The moment you can say, this is a trigger that activates when I'm in scarcity thinking, in that moment, you have begun to separate yourself from it. You have stepped, however slightly, into the role of the investigator rather than the infected. Journaling, therapy, and contemplative practice, whatever your method, the work is the same. To become the conscious director of your own inner oldest house, rather than a corrupted agent wandering its halls.
He seems more in control, more present.
Jesse Faden did not arrive at the oldest house by accident. She was drawn there, pulled by the unresolved trauma of her childhood. When she and Dylan encountered the slide projector in Ordinary, Wisconsin, the town was destroyed. Dylan was taken. Jesse fled, and for years afterward, she carried that event like a sealed wound in her psyche, walled off, shaping her without her permission. Remedy uses Jesse's memories brilliantly. The game's most haunting sections are the film-grain sequences set in Ordinary, static, dreamlike, slightly worn, colors too washed out, sounds subtly off. The quality of a memory revisited so many times in secret that it has started to degrade, losing coherence while intensifying in emotional charge. This is how traumatic memory actually works. Neuroscience tells us that traumatic memories aren't properly processed or resolved. They sit in the nervous system like an open wound, raw and reactive, bleeding into the present in ways we rarely connect back to their source. Jessie carries guilt, the buried belief that she abandoned Dylan, that she ran when she should have stayed. And this unprocessed wound is exactly what the Hiss exploits. It gets into Dylan, amplifies his pain, turns his suffering into a weapon against his sister and against the building itself. The trauma that was never processed became the point of entry for something much darker. Unprocessed trauma does not go dormant. It goes underground, and then it runs the operation from there.
But I wouldn't mind understanding more myself.
We all have an ordinary, the formative event or series of events that bent reality slightly sideways and left us navigating a distorted world ever since. The breakup that made love feel dangerous. The parental criticism that made success feel like a trap. The childhood home where safety was uncertain and you learned early that the world required constant vigilance. The Burial's protocol is to study these events, not run from them. To document them, map them, understand their parameters. Because what we refuse to examine continues to operate in the dark, altering our world without our consent. Jesse eventually returns to Ordinary, walks through it consciously, integrates it, and it is only through that act of courageous return that she becomes fully capable of the role she has been given. One of the things that makes Control so exhilarating is its treatment of the paranormal, not as something to be feared or dismissed, but as something deserving rigorous, open-minded investigation. The FBC doesn't deny that the television is broadcasting impossible signals. It says, this is real. We don't yet understand it, let's understand it. There is a researcher named Casper Darling, exuberant, brilliant, slightly unhinged, who delivers video monologues equal parts scientific breathing and barely contained ecstasy. He is in love with the strangeness of what he has found, and watching him, you realize something. The greatest obstacle to understanding is not ignorance. It is a decision made in advance about what reality is and isn't allowed to be. We live in a cultural moment deeply allergic to mystery. We are trained by education, by social pressure, by the relentless drive for measurable outcomes to dismiss what we cannot immediately categorize, to explain away the inexplicable experiences that most human beings, if they are honest, have had. The dream that came true, the synchronicity that changed everything, the gut feeling that turned out to be right. Control dares to say, perhaps there are structures of meaning and force at work that our current models cannot contain, and the appropriate response is not cynicism, but investigation, curiosity, the willingness to hold open questions without collapsing them prematurely into answers that feel safe. The life lesson is about cultivating a beginner's mind in your relationship with your own experience. The moments that don't fit, the hunches that proved prescient, the coincidences that have carried weight are worth paying attention to rather than explaining away. Like Jesse moving through the oldest house with a flashlight and her service weapon, we are better served by moving toward the unknown parts of ourselves with curiosity rather than retreat, because the parts of life that feel most paranormal are often precisely where the most important growth is waiting. When Jessie picks up the service weapon, she doesn't feel triumphant. She feels the weight of it. Her internal monologue is not pride. It is something closer to bewildered responsibility.
They call me the director. But that's not me. I'm not a director type. I'm not a leader.
But the weapon chose her, and the building chose her, and now the only options are to step into it or abandon it. Throughout the game, the power she accumulates, levitation, telekinesis, the ability to seize and redirect the his, is never fictionless. Every gift in the oldest house has a cost. Every object of power comes with binding rules and rituals of maintenance. Power not earned through understanding is not really yours. It will destabilize you. The FBC is littered with the wreckage of people who encountered power they weren't ready for and were consumed rather than transformed. Jessie earns her authority through willingness. To keep going when a building makes no sense, to enter the dark threshold spaces of the ashtray maze, the panopticon, the pit, even when every instinct says turn back. Willingness to be changed by what she encounters, rather than imposing her prior map of reality onto the territory. The board, that vast, unknowable, triangular entity communicating in cryptic fragments from beyond normal perception, does not demand perfection from Jessie. It demands authenticity, that she remain genuinely in dialogue with the strange and terrifying reality of the oldest house, rather than managing it from a position of forced certainty. In your own life, the authority you carry in any domain, as a parent, a leader, an artist, a partner, is directly proportional to your willingness to keep learning. The moment you stop being genuinely curious about your own blind spots, your power begins to corrupt. The hiss gets in through the cracks of our certainty. The most dangerous person in any organization is not the one who doubts themselves. It is the one who has stopped doubting themselves entirely.
He sure has a lot of faith in his boss.
There is something very deliberate about Remedy's choice to set control inside a government bureaucracy. The FBC, for all its weirdness, is still a workplace. HR memos, filing systems, middle management, and interdepartmental politics, and a culture of institutional secrecy that keeps its own agents in the dark. Whole divisions dedicated to understanding phenomena that the people 2 floors above them have been trained to deny exist. The right hand willfully does not know what the left hand is doing. This is a dark joke, but also a profound one. How much of our psychological life operates exactly like a dysfunctional bureaucracy? We have departments of the self that don't communicate. The part that wants creative freedom and the part that demands financial security. We have files classified for so long, we've forgotten what's in them. Policies inherited from predecessors, parents, culture, earliest wounding that no longer serve us, but that no one has thought to revise because revising them would mean acknowledging they were wrong to begin with. The FBC under the previous director Trench was exactly this. Trench was not a bad man, he was a damaged one. He had encountered things that broke his model of reality, and rather than integrating those encounters, he built an institution around containing them, locking them away in reinforced rooms and hoping that was enough. Eventually, inevitably, it wasn't, because what we suppress rather than understand does not stay suppressed. It accumulates force, it waits, and when the conditions are right, it doesn't just re-emerge, it takes over. Jesse's ultimate task as director is not to defeat every paranormal threat. It is to create enough coherence and consciousness within the organization that it can function without her constant intervention, to bring light into the classified sections, to make the FBC operate in genuine alignment with its stated purpose rather than in fearful, reflexive secrecy. The practical life lesson is the most demanding in the entire game. You must become the director of your own interior life, not the victim of it. The active, conscious, accountable director.
The only person you should fail is yourself.
This means auditing the beliefs running your decisions and asking where they came from. Having the courage to access the classified files, the memories, the self-narratives you've kept sealed, and reviewing them with fresh eyes. Noticing when you are acting on old institutional policy, a rule about how much you are allowed to want, how safe it is to be seen, and asking whether that policy was actually yours, or whether you inherited it from someone who was themselves operating in the dark. Jessie does not emerge from the oldest house unchanged. She is carrying more knowledge, more responsibility, more awareness of the forces that had always been at work within her. But she is also unmistakably more herself, more integrated. She has not become a different person. She has become a more awake version of who she always was. The psychological forces that shape human life do not get neatly resolved. They get worked with, understood more deeply over time, integrated rather than eliminated. The goal is not a life without his. The goal is a self strong enough, awake enough, and honest enough to work with what arises rather than be destroyed by it. You are the oldest house. The shifting corridors are your contradictions. The objects of power are your wounds transformed into gift. The very things that broke you, which once named and understood, become the source of your most distinctive strength. The his is every automatic pattern, every inherited fear, every complex that has been running your life without your awareness. And you, the conscious, courageous, curious you, are always the director, whether you've claimed that role yet or not. Control invites you to claim it, to investigate rather than avoid, to name what shapes you, to face your ordinary, to hold mystery with openness rather than flinching, to understand that genuine power is earned through encounter, not inheritance, to stop running the institution on old policies written by frightened predecessors, and to direct the organization of your own life with enough consciousnness and honesty that you stop being controlled and start genuinely to become the one who controls. The oldest house is waiting. The surface weapon has already chosen you. All that remains is to pick it up. Thank you for watching.